Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel where today I'm going to be doing a review of A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I may as well get it out of the way at the start of the review. I hated this book, guys. I do not know why everyone is raving about this book. I thought it was terrible, it's boring, it's poorly written, and I'm just kidding. I loved this book. 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was just phenomenal and I'm so excited to talk about it. I was originally trying to think of a way to review this without going into spoilers, but I enjoyed this book so much and I have a lot of things to say about it, so this review is going to contain spoilers. And if you haven't read either the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, or this one, I would definitely recommend reading those and then watching this video another time. I read the first book in this series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, last year, and I ended up giving it 3 or 3.5 out of 5 stars because it was good, but there were a lot of things about it that I wasn't happy with. One of them was the relationship between the main character Feyre and Tamlin. It kind of just seemed like a relationship of convenience, like she got into the fairy world and fell in love with the first guy she met. There was nothing really to his character. He felt kind of bland and just like the ideal guy, and I found that really boring. And also I had issue with the pacing of A Court of Thorns and Roses. I think the first 2/3 of the book were kind of slow and lacking in the character and world development that should have been there. I loved the final third where it's under the mountain with Amarantha and Rhys, and it was really dramatic and I loved those bits. But the good thing about A Court of Mist and Fury is that it really packs in the character development and the world building and all that stuff that I think the first book was really lacking. I really loved the development of our main character in this book, how we see her as really struggling with the reality of what she did under the mountain in the first book. You know, she killed people and she was murdered and then brought back from the dead and made immortal. And I really loved that we got to see that she was still human and really struggling and having nightmares. And I like that as a part of her development, she never really got over what happened so much as she saw it as a part of her past and what had shaped her to be who she is, and was very ready to use it to inform her decisions in the future, which I just think was a really adult way to come to terms with something horrible that she'd done. Speaking of character development, can we just take a second to appreciate the amazing transformation of Rhys? In the first book, I found him really intriguing. I knew that because he was going to be a part of the second book, there was no way he could be completely evil. There had to be something more to him, and I was so glad that in this book we really got more information about him and his motivations, and found out that he's actually a wonderful guy who's just made a lot of sacrifices and told a lot of lies to keep the people he cares about safe. And I loved that it was never just all at once, he's a good guy, that's it. You know, we got little glimpses of his character throughout the book, and all of a sudden by the end of it you're like, oh my god, I love him, because I really do. I think he's an amazing character and I love him. I think I mentioned in another video that I was really nervous this book would be kind of about a love triangle, and I am so happy that it wasn't. Instead of being a love triangle where Feyre's trying to choose between Tamlin and Rhys and really struggling with it, it's more about a character maturing and realizing that the first guy, Tamlin, wasn't right for her. He was right at the time, but he's not anymore. And then she doesn't just run straight to Rhys and be like, I love you. She kind of still dislikes him, and their relationship evolves throughout the book, where it goes from her hating him to her tolerating him to her kind of liking him to them being friends, then they're romantic, and then they're the best, most badass couple ever. And it was just such great relationship development because there was no insta love. It was kind of just they grew to love each other, which again is a really adult thing that happened, and I'm so glad it wasn't a love triangle, and it was just the most beautiful relationship, and the development of it was just so great. There were a lot of great relationships in this book. I loved the new characters that we're introduced to in the Night Court. You know, Rhys's friends and his seconds in command and all that. They were just such great characters, and I loved the dynamic between the group, how they all brought something kind of unique to the table but worked really well. You could tell they were friends and that they cared about each other, and I found just the dialogue between them to be really genuine and funny and just lovely. And I think this comes down to Sarah J. Maas being a really clever writer. She writes characters who are really vivid and genuine, and her descriptions of stuff are so vivid that it kind of just creates this really realistic picture despite this being fantasy. I'm kind of hoping that makes sense. Did that make sense? Yeah. It did. My only real criticism of Sarah J Maas's writing was the sex scenes, which I didn't dislike, and I still gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, but I just found them to be way too wordy at times. But this is just a small criticism. This book is amazing. I loved the story of this book and the way that in the end it all comes together and you're like, oh my god, and that ending was just amazing, and I'm so excited for the next book, but I can't believe that I have to wait for it. Like, it causes me physical pain whenever I think about how long I'm gonna have to wait to find out what happens to these characters. But this book is just great, so if you haven't read it or if you haven't really considered this series, I would definitely recommend it. I think it's really clever and great fantasy and just so entertaining and awesome that I have so many descriptive words about. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts. So that's it for my review of this book, guys. I hope you liked this review. If you've also read this book, let me know what you thought down in the comments, or leave me a link to your review as well, because I'm so excited to hear what other people thought of this book. But I upload videos every Wednesday and Saturday, so be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned on those days for more bookish goodness. Toodaloo!